Hi guys, how's it going? Ivano here with a new video in our introduction to PvP series. And today I want to talk about learning the maps and also give you guys some basic struts for all of the different war zones in the game. So the first point that you need to know about is learning the layouts of the different maps. Why is this important? Well, obviously if your teammates are calling 3 incoming at jungle in a Yavin war zone, then you need to know where jungle is. Otherwise you can't help them, right? But also it's important to learn where you can walk and where not, where there are good places to hide, where the obstacles are that you can hide behind as a ranged player, and so on. So no need to reinvent the wheel. There are already some great written guides on all of the different basics of the war zones that can summarize the most important info. So I will link them in the description below. We're going to go over them. So the one that I recommend is this one here on valk.com. That really summarizes all of the info, and I think it's mostly still up to date, mostly correct. So if you're a new player, make sure that you check out valk.com and especially this article. All right, so the first thing I want to talk about is that you learn where the different Warzone buffs are, what they do, and when to use them. One example would be the Warzone Med Pack. Now I think that's actually not how it's called. Technically it's called a healing node, or the buff that you get is actually called Healing Infusion. Basically what it does is it gives you a 75% HP heal. So here's an example of how that looks like in a war zone. We are in a pretty bad fight, we're going low, we are out of cooldowns. So what we want to do here is, of course, we are fighting in this area right now, and we know that there's a med pack over here. So what we want to do is get out of this fight and run this way towards the med pack. A little note, there is a shortcut you can take to get to the medpack faster. So obviously the long way around is to go here and then up this little elevation to the medpack. But there's also a shortcut you can take by jumping on this pipe here and then doing another jump up here, which is shorter and faster. Make sure when you're doing that you don't miss the jump. In this case, I chose to go the long way around because these guys keep hitting me and I just want to create maximum distance here. So I make sure that I actually survive. But this is a neat little trick you can use sometimes. And of course, this is how the med pack looks. And if you go and pick it up, you will get a nice big heal to full. Another note on the Warzone med pack, make sure to not steal it from your teammates. So don't take it if you're at 99% HP and there's a SOC healer next to you who really needs to stay alive and is very low HP. Yeah, guys, just don't steal it from your teammates. Of course, there are exceptions. You know, if there are no teammates close and you are fighting an enemy who is already pretty low HP and is about to take the med pack, then of course steal it from him even if you're at 99% HP. Second important buff that you need to know about is the so-called red buff. I think actually this description here is not technically correct because I think the reduced damage taken is not in the game anymore. That used to be a thing in the past. But if you look at this buff, which you get, the so-called red buff, actually it's called overcharge power. It gives you 15% bonus to damage and healing. I also think 25 seconds here is not correct. Down here it says what it actually does. So the buff actually lasts for 15 seconds, not 25 seconds. And it modifies your damage boost to players by 15%. So you do 15% more damage to players, as well as healing. So 15% more healing, 15% more damage, which is great even if the damage reduction thing is not in the game anymore. You can use this obviously for massive crits. These buffs will always spawn at the beginning of the war zone. This is how it looks. And you pick it up and then you just run over there and proceed to one-shot the sorcerer. We stop it here quickly. You can see the buff down here. And this is how it looks like. And it just basically makes all of your attacks hit 15% harder, which is nice. Okay, finally then there is a movement speed buff that you need to know. This is the case in most war zones, and what it does is it basically just doubles your movement speed, lasts for 15 seconds. Now this doesn't stack with other buffs in the game, such as hydraulics, so make sure that you chain them and you don't stack them over each other. But yeah, it's a very useful buff if you want to move faster between objectives, so it's very useful for those big Odessen war zones. But also for ancient Hypergate pylons, for example, there are some movement speed buffs in the tunnel that can allow you to rotate between the pylons and help your team cap or defend the other side. Okay, so once you've learned what different buffs there are in the game, what they do and how to use them, you should learn how the objectives actually work. Because this will tell you where other players in your team and also the enemy team will most likely go. And then obviously you can counter them, you can intercept them and try to win the game. Now all of this is described pretty well in this article here, which again I suggest that you read if you haven't done so already. So I will quickly go over them and just discuss a couple of basic strategies for all of the war zones here. Starting with Civil War. Now in Civil War there is two basic strats. The first one will be that if you have a team which is good at team fighting, then you want to come in here and you want to fight mid. Fight mid, cap mid, and then keep controlling mid. And the second focus will be the side that is closest to your respawn. So if this is your respawn zone, if you're starting on this team, you want to control mid and grass. Why? Because mid is obviously the closest in proximity to your respawn. And grass is also a little bit closer to your respawn compared to the other team's respawn. That's because the maps are not exactly symmetrical, and this line will be longer than this line. So this is plan A, and if you can control mid and win the fight in mid, that is very good, and it will always be an easy warzone for you. Because again, once you control the objectives, it's easier to defend because the objectives are closer to your respawn. So even if you should die, you will have an easier time to reinforce these positions compared to the enemies. However, if you cannot win the team fight and or you have stealth comp, then you can try to defend the sides, aka snow and grass. How will that look? So we call that plan B. Let's say you're losing the fight in mid, then you're just going to decide to, for example, send 4 people to grass, and you'll try to control grass and snow with something like this, a 4-4 split. The enemy will control mid, and then they will try to overload one of the sides and, for example, send 7 people here while one guy is defending mid or something like this. So if that happens, what you can do is, of course, that 4 people shouldn't stay at snow and defend. Usually it's enough if 1 or 2 people stay and defend the so-called off node, and then the other 2 defenders should go through the tunnel because it's the shortest way. There's a tunnel down here, and help your team defend grass. This is obviously a little bit harder than just the plan A, which is control mid, and then the side node, which is closest to your respawn. But because of overpowered defensive cooldowns, tanks and heals being really good together, and also stealthers with multiple resets, it can work as well. One more tip for team fighting in Civil War: good positions for ranged players or healers are somewhere here in the backline, but you can also position yourself up here on these ledges in order to keep enemy DPS at bay. Pro tip: if you're a Juggernaut player, you can force push a player over this wall here. If you get the angle right, so position yourself, for example, down here. And if your enemy is standing up here, then you can push them over this wall, which will lead them to fall all the way back over here. And that means they have to walk back around, which can take, something like 20 seconds, and it's really annoying for them. Okay, Yavin is basically the same as Civil War because it's just a reskin, except that mid is even easier to defend because you have these stairs here that you can just walk down and get to the side nodes faster. That means it's even more important to control mid because once you have it, it's really hard to lose it. So plan A here will be even better, which again is if you're spawning here, control mid, send, for example, 6 people here to win the team fight, and then 1 or 2 people, depending on what the enemy does, will go and defend west here. The only notable other thing that's different about Yavin is that you have these fast taps here. So these are power-ups that make it so you will cap the objective faster. So use it to your advantage, and if you see an enemy that has them, they will have some kind of orange glow on their character. Make sure that you always prioritize killing those. On Novare, it's basically the same thing. It's very important that you control mid, aka south. The game plan is the same. Plan A, if you have a teamfight comp, send the majority of your team to mid. This will be the most important objective to control. And then send a stealther or 2 people over here to hold the off node. If you cannot win the fight in mid, then plan B is to control the sides. This will be hard because east in this case is very close to the enemy respawn and very far away from your respawn. But if you have a lot of stealthers or really good tank and heal, then this can work as well. A tip would be to not over-defend a lost node. So if you're about to lose West, for example, and your whole team is dead, everyone is here in respawn, you're about to lose this node, don't go there and try to fight a lost battle. Make sure that you send all of your 5 people from respawn directly to mid to hopefully overwhelm this 1 or 2 defenders here and capture it, while the enemy team has to first cap it, which takes a while, and then walk all the way back here. So this way you can sometimes win a closely fought Novare Coast. So the basic thing about Hypergate is, of course, that the first team to get 600 points wins the Warzone. There are 2 pylons here, the western pylon, the eastern pylon. And this one is a little bit different from the other Warzone, because you do get points for capturing orbs, which are spawning here in the middle, aka the shelter. And then you can deposit them into either this pylon or this pylon, depending which one you have kept. You can also cap both pylons. But the main difference is that you also get points from kills in Hypergate. And the points from kills are stored, and then in later rounds they will give you more points. You can see that here when you look at the scoreboard, right? So in the beginning a kill will get you 3 points, for example, but then later it will have this little multiplicator here. So each kill will give you 4 points, in the next round 5 points, 6 points, and so on. So kills become very important, but especially because the points from kills are never lost, they are stored. So if you pick up an orb, but then you cannot deposit it because your team lost a pylon, that point is lost. But if you farm kills in the early rounds, those points will be stored and you can cash them in later if you manage to cap a pylon. So focus on getting a bunch of kills in the early rounds, while the enemies are focusing on getting all the pylons. Then sometimes the enemy can be at 400 points, but in the next round you will get 2 pylons and you'll win the game. I would say in general the first rounds the pylons don't really matter as much, so I would focus on sending most of your people mid, getting some kills here, and also preventing the enemies from carrying the orbs. Then in the later rounds, when the kills are worth a lot of points, what you want to do is don't waste any time here in mid, but as soon as the explosion is over, you want to send, let's say, 1 or 2 people to their pylon, ideally a tank and a healer, but also 2 stealthers can do it, and just prevent them from capping this pylon. They will try to cap it, and let's say they overcommit, they send 6 people or something to defend, but your 2 people can survive long enough. Then you can do the same thing on the other side, and you need to focus with these 6 people on killing their 2 defenders, capping the pylon, and cashing in all of the kills from the previous rounds, which will give you, 1,000 points or something crazy sometimes. Of course, back in the ranked days, this Warzone was mostly played with a 4-4 split, meaning that teams would split up the team evenly. So you would have 2 premates, basically 4 players going here to this pylon and 4 players going to this pylon. And, mid would pretty much never happen. This is a really boring way to play the game, but however, it is the most efficient. So if that's what you want to do, that's also one way to win Hypergate. Voidstar, to be honest, nowadays is really unplayable with how overpowered tanks, healers, and even DPS classes with multiple defensive cooldowns, resets, and so on, but especially stealthers with multiple vanishes are. So the problem with Voidstar is that you can simply not kill the defending team fast enough before the respawn opens again. And also the respawn here is very close to the doors, so it's quite in the favor of the defenders actually. Basic strategy, however, for Voidstar is to send 7 players left and 1 stealther to the right. So as you come out of respawn, you pick up the buff here, and then you split up your team. There's a wall here in the middle that defenders cannot pass through, so they have to decide where to commit their team to once they spawn. Of course, you can also send 2 stealthers if you have them, which makes it easier for them to stealth cap on a sleeping defender. But again, it's going to be an uphill battle, and typically if the defending team has eyes and pays attention, then it's not going to be easy to cap the door here. However, what you can do is you can try to distract the defenders, force them into a team fight, for example here or close to your respawn, and then the stealther can sneak behind them this way, for example, and cap at the door when no one is paying attention. So the second door in Voidstar is actually the hardest to cap, because there, first of all, is no barrier here in mid compared to the first room. So the defenders have also a very short way out of the respawn, and then it's really easy for them to rotate between the different doors and just cover this whole area. Also, the attacker respawn is all the way over here, so you have to walk here, 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 and all the way over there. Of course, before you get over here, you first have to cap these nodes in order to open the bridges. Something that the defenders can do if you do die as a defender, you can walk up all the way to here. And if you're a Juggernaut or a Marauder and an enemy comes here, you can actually leap to them if you get in range. Might need to jump over the edge and risk it though. If you're a Juggernaut or a Guardian, you can intercede to a teammate this way. Of course, if you have a Sorc on your team, they can simply walk up here and pull your teammate over. Be wary when you cross the bridge, as you can easily get knocked off either way, so make sure you have an immunity ready for that. Odessen, to be honest, I just really don't like this map, so whenever it pops, I just hope that it will be a nice teamfight in mid, or maybe a nice AoE Zerg out here. Otherwise, just run around. I mean, this Warzone, to be honest, I think needed speeders or something because it's simply too big. And trying to explain this properly would be a 30-minute video. So instead, I'm just not going to do it. Moving on, Huttball. Well, this is a Warzone that I actually enjoy. A lot of people hate it, but I think it's probably the most unique map that is in the game, and I enjoy it. So just some general tips. If you want to score the ball, the best way is to avoid going up here and trying to cross all these fire traps and walk here. This just takes so long. The easiest way to score in Huttball is to simply grab the ball in mid if you're on this team, run it down this way, jump into the pit, position yourself somewhere here under those ledges so that it's not easy for the enemy team to fire pull you, in case they have a PowerTech or a Shadow Tank, for example, and then pass to a teammate who's waiting in stealth in the end zone. This is the fastest way. In general, healers should position themselves in mid because controlling mid is really important. Of course, it's good if ranged players stand up here to make it so that it's really hard for enemies to attack them. So if you're a Sorc or Sniper player, position yourself on these ledges. The exception to that rule is that a Sorcerer heal or Sorcerer in general can place their phase walk in advantageous positions in order to pull a teammate. You can even place your phase walk in the end zone, and then your teammate grabs the ball. You run with them here, and you heal them, heal them, heal them. And as they run to the pit, you phase walk all the way here, and then you can pull them up for an easy score. Quesh is pretty much the same principle, except that you cannot jump to people in the end zone here. So if you're a Juggernaut down here, you cannot jump up. Sorry, it's not that easy. Walking over the pipes is really OP. So if your teammate has the ball here, pass up to the pipes, you can simply walk it over. Especially if you're a sniper, that's a really good position to be in up here. Another tip for Quesh is that there's a pipe down here on which you can jump between mid and bottom. You get to this pipe by jumping on this little ledge, and then you can walk here, which is actually like hiding you under mid. So if you're trying to make a quick escape, you're playing a healer or something, this is a nice way to get away from a sticky situation. So yeah, here you can see the pipe, and it's just exactly walking this way. Conveniently, there's also a Warzone med pack here that you can take. Of course, always make sure to pull people into acid or fire traps for quick capture. And then on Quesh, there's another trick you can do. You can actually pass all the way from down here, from the bottom floor, all the way to the top, which is next to the other acid pit. And the teammate can get the ball and then directly score in 5 seconds or less. This is the fastest way to win Quesh. And you can see I'm just aiming my Huttball here. My teammate will appear there in a second. And that's a quick and easy score. Finally, some tips for Vandin Huttball. I would say even more than in regular Huttball, don't even try to go up here. You're going to have to pass this fire pit. Then there's a bunch of stun traps here. There's additional stun traps here. They just stun you for what feels like eternity. And it's just going to take too long. So instead, what you're going to do is exactly the same game plan. You're going to capture the ball, you're going to go below into the pit, and you're going to pass to a teammate on the line for an easy score. Finally, the Warzone buffs and the red buff on Vandin are in quite far off locations, so they're quite useless. And if you're actually playing the game, sometimes it can be faster to die, go to the respawn, and then just run back, as opposed to trying to get these buffs all the way over here. However, there are some quite useful grapple points down here that you can use to quickly get up back on a ledge once you're in the pit. And of course, after you respawn, make sure to use these ventilators that take you faster to mid, which is where you want to be. That's all I have for today, guys. Hopefully this quick little guide helped you to get a little bit better at PvP. If it did, please remember to leave a like on the video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.